My name is Jane, and I just turned 68 last month. It still hurts to think about that day in the lawyer's office when my daughter Amanda looked me straight in the eyes and said those words. You are not family. You only stayed because it was convenient. 30 years of loving her as my own child wiped away in a single sentence. I signed another document that day before walking out in silence. Before I tell you what happened after I walked out of that lawyer's office, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how karma works its magic in real life. I met Harold when we were both already deep into adulthood. I was 38 working as a librarian, and he was 42, a civil engineer with a successful career and an 8-year-old daughter named Amanda. We bumped into each other at a community fundraiser, both volunteering to help set up the event. There was something gentle about Harold, a quiet strength that drew me to him immediately. Our first date was simple, just coffee at a local cafe, but we talked for nearly 4 hours. He told me about losing his wife to cancer 3 years earlier and his struggles raising Amanda alone. I could see the love in his eyes when he spoke about his daughter, and it made me admire him even more. Dating as a single parent is complicated, and Harold was understandably cautious. It was 3 months before I met Amanda, and that first meeting was awkward to say the least. She was shy, barely looking at me, answering my questions with one-word responses. I had prepared myself for this, knowing that any child would be protective of their parent and wary of newcomers. She just needs time, Harold assured me that evening after dropping Amanda at his sister's for a sleepover so we could have dinner alone. She's still processing a lot, and time was exactly what I gave her. I never pushed, never tried to replace her mother. Instead, I looked for small ways to connect, discovering she loved books as much as I did. I started bringing her age-appropriate novels whenever I visited, and slowly she began to open up. When Harold proposed a year later, we made sure to include Amanda in the conversation. We sat her down in their living room, surrounded by her favorite stuffed animals. Amanda, sweetheart, Harold said, taking my hand. Jane and I want to get married, but you're the most important person in my life, so I wanted to know how you feel about that. Amanda looked at me carefully, her big brown eyes serious. Will you still let me have pizza on Fridays? I smiled, relief washing over me. Of course, and maybe I can show you how to make it from scratch sometimes. She nodded solemnly. Okay then. It wasn't enthusiastic approval, but it was acceptance, and that was enough for now. The early days of marriage brought challenges I hadn't fully anticipated. Moving into their home, I was constantly aware of trying to respect the routines and traditions they had established. There were photographs of Amanda's mother throughout the house, and I made sure they stayed exactly where they were. This was their history, and I would never try to erase that. School mornings were the hardest adjustment. Amanda was used to her father's way of doing things, from how her lunch was packed to the exact route they took to school. The first time I had to drop her off alone, she corrected my every move. Dad doesn't put the sandwich on top of the apple squishes it, she said, repacking her lunchbox in the car. Dad always parks in the second row, she informed me as I pulled into the school parking lot. Dad walks me to the steps, not all the way to the door, she added, as I started to escort her inside. I swallowed my frustration and simply nodded. Thank you for letting me know. I'll remember for next time. Evenings brought their own rituals. Harold would read to Amanda before bed, a tradition I was careful not to intrude upon. Instead, I found my own special time with her Sunday afternoons, when Harold watched football. Amanda and I would bake cookies or work on craft projects in the kitchen. Slowly, these became our traditions. The first time Amanda called me Mom was 3 years after the wedding. It happened so naturally that at first I almost didn't notice. We were at her school science fair admiring her project on plant growth. A teacher walked by and asked, "Is this your mother?" Before I could clarify, Amanda said, "Yeah, that's my mum." No hesitation, no awkwardness. My heart swelled so much I thought it might burst, but I kept my composure, simply smiling and complimenting her project to the teacher. In the car on the way home, I finally found the courage to address it. "Amanda, You know it's okay if you want to call me Jane. I understand. She looked out the window for a long moment before answering. I have two mums, one in heaven and one here. Dad says that's more love than most kids get. I had to pull over because I couldn't see through my tears. That evening I told Harold what had happened, and he held me while I cried happy tears. As the years passed, our family life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Harold's career flourished, and he eventually started his own engineering consulting firm. I continued my work at the library, eventually becoming head librarian. Amanda grew from a thoughtful child into a bright, ambitious teenager. We had our share of typical family moments. The summer vacations to the lake where Harold taught Amanda to fish. The Christmas Eve traditions of hot chocolate and reading a Christmas carol. The arguments about curfews and homework as Amanda entered her teen years. The pride we both felt watching her graduate high school as valedictorian. When she left for college studying business at a prestigious university across the country, Harold and I found ourselves adjusting to an empty nest. We rediscovered each other, taking weekend trips, trying new restaurants, and enjoying the quiet moments we now had in abundance. Our love had deepened over the years, becoming something rich and comfortable, like a favorite sweater you never want to take off. Amanda thrived in college, making the dean's list consistently and securing impressive internships during her summers. She would call weekly, telling us about her classes, her friends, and her dreams for the future. Those calls were the highlights of our weeks. When she graduated college, Harold and I sat in the audience holding hands and fighting back tears as she walked across the stage. That evening at dinner, Harold raised his glass in a toast. "To my brilliant daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and to the woman who helped raise her into the incredible person she is today." He looked at me with such love that even after all these years I blushed. Amanda smiled at us both. "I couldn't have asked for better parents," she said, and I felt complete in a way I never had before. We were a family bound not by blood, but by years of love, shared experiences, and mutual respect. Or at least that's what I believed. Amanda was 26 when she brought Patrick home to meet us. She had been working at a financial consulting firm in the city for a few years and had recently been promoted to junior partner. She was thriving in her career, and from our weekly calls I knew she had been dating someone for several months, but this was the first time she wanted to introduce him to us. Patrick was 29, tall and conventionally handsome, with perfect white teeth and carefully styled dark hair. He worked in the same firm as Amanda, but in a different department. He was charming during that first dinner, complimenting my cooking, asking Harold thoughtful questions about his business, and looking at Amanda with apparent adoration. "So do you own your firm outright, Mr. Stevens, or do you have investors?" Patrick asked Harold over dessert. "Please call me Harold," my husband replied with a smile. "And yes, I'm the sole owner. Started it from scratch 20 years ago." "That's impressive." Patrick nodded. "Must give you a lot of freedom in your retirement planning." It seemed like an odd question for a first meeting, but I dismissed it. After all, they both worked in finance, so perhaps this was normal conversation for them. Later that night, after they had left, I mentioned it to Harold as we were getting ready for bed. "Did you notice how many questions Patrick asked about your business and our finances?" I asked, brushing my hair at the vanity. Harold chuckled, unbuttoning his shirt. "The boy works in finance, Jane. It's probably just professional interest." "Maybe," I said, but something about Patrick's too perfect smile and the calculating look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching had unsettled me. I just hope he loves Amanda for who she is, not what she might inherit someday. Harold came over and kissed the top of my head. "You worry too much. Amanda is smart and independent. She wouldn't be with someone who didn't value her." I wanted to believe that, but something about Patrick triggered my maternal instincts in a way I couldn't explain. Still, I kept my concerns to myself. Amanda was an adult, and I didn't want to interfere in her relationships. Maybe I was just being overprotective, or worse, jealous of sharing her attention with someone new. Over the next year, we saw Amanda and Patrick frequently. They would come for Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, and occasional weekend visits. Patrick was always polite, helpful, and attentive to Amanda, but I noticed small things: how he would subtly guide her decisions, how his questions about our financial situations became more specific, how he would scan our home eyes, lingering on artwork or antiques, as if mentally appraising them. When Amanda called to tell us they were engaged after just a year of dating, I tried to sound as enthusiastic as she deserved. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful news," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "We're so happy for you both." "Thanks, Mum," she replied, her voice brimming with excitement. "Patrick planned the most romantic proposal. He took me to this exclusive restaurant on the waterfront, and there was champagne and a violinist. And then he got down on one knee with this gorgeous ring." After the call, Harold noticed my subdued mood. "What's wrong? Aren't you happy for them?" I sighed, trying to articulate my unease. "Of course I'm happy that Amanda is happy. I don't know, Harold. Something about Patrick feels calculated to me, like he's playing a role." Harold pulled me into a hug. "Our little girl is getting married. It's normal to feel protective, but we need to trust her judgment." I nodded against his chest, wanting desperately to be wrong about Patrick. The wedding was elaborate and expensive, with Patrick's parents contributing significantly. It was a beautiful ceremony, and Amanda looked radiant in her designer gown. As I helped her get ready that morning, I tried one last time to make sure she was certain. "Amanda, sweetheart," I said, as I adjusted her veil. "You know that marriage is about more than romance and beautiful moments, right? It's about partnership, respect, and truly seeing each other." She smiled at me in the mirror. "I know, Mum. Patrick and I have talked about everything. Our careers, our goals, even how many kids we want. We're on the same page." I nodded and squeezed her shoulders gently. "Then I'm happy for you, darling." After the wedding, we saw a subtle shift in our relationship with Amanda. The weekly calls became less frequent, often rescheduled or cut short. Sunday dinners turned into monthly brunches, which were sometimes cancelled last minute due to work commitments or social obligations. Patrick's behaviour toward me also changed. The charming smile remained, but there was a new coldness in his eyes when he looked at me, a dismissiveness that hadn't been there before. He would direct conversations away from me sometimes, interrupting when I was speaking to ask Harold a question instead. It was subtle enough that calling him out would have seemed petty, but I felt it acutely. During one family gathering, I overheard Patrick talking to Amanda in the kitchen, not realizing I was approaching. "Your stepmom is being dramatic again," he was saying. "You know how she gets, always trying to be the center of attention." I froze in the hallway, hurt washing over me. I had never thought of myself as Amanda's stepmom, not after all these years. I was just her mum, or so I believed. And I had certainly never tried to draw attention to myself, quite the opposite, in fact. Amanda's response was even more painful. "I know, just ignore her. We only have to deal with these family dinners once a month anyway." I silently retreated to the bathroom, fighting back tears. When had this happened? When had I become someone to deal with, rather than family to cherish? I splashed cold water on my face and put on a smile before returning to the living room, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. As months turned into years, Amanda and Patrick became increasingly focused on their careers and social climbing. Their visits became briefer, their calls rarer. I tried to maintain the connection, sending care packages suggesting lunch dates when I was in the city, but Amanda always seemed to have just enough time to be polite without truly engaging. Harold noticed the change too, though he tried to rationalize it. "They're building their own lives, Jane. It's natural for young couples to focus on each other and their careers." But I knew it was more than that. There was a deliberate distance being created, especially by Patrick, and increasingly Amanda was following his lead. The news came on an ordinary Tuesday. Harold had been feeling unusually tired for weeks, sometimes experiencing shortness of breath when climbing the stairs. I had been urging him to see a doctor, and he finally relented after nearly fainting in his home office. The diagnosis was devastating: advanced heart disease requiring immediate intervention, and likely a heart transplant eventually. The doctor's words blurred as she explained the treatments, the medications, the lifestyle changes. All I could focus on was Harold's hand gripping mine, the fear in his eyes that he was trying so hard to hide from me. In the car on the way home, he broke the silence. "We need to tell Amanda." I nodded, already pulling out my phone, but Amanda didn't answer. I left a voicemail asking her to call us as soon as possible about an urgent family matter. Hours passed with no response. I tried again that evening and again the next morning. Finally, I sent a text explicitly stating that her father had received serious medical news and needed to speak with her. She called back an hour later. "Mum, what's going on with Dad? Your messages scared me." I explained the situation as calmly as I could, trying not to let my hurt at her delayed response seep into my voice. "The doctor wants to start treatment right away. Your father would really like to see you." "Oh my God," she said, and I could hear genuine distress in her voice. "Of course. Let me talk to Patrick and check our schedules. We'll try to come this weekend." Try. They would try to come see her seriously ill father. I bit back my frustration. "That would be wonderful, honey. Your dad would be so happy to see you." They did come that weekend, arriving Saturday afternoon and planning to leave Sunday morning. Patrick spent most of the visit on his phone, stepping out for calls repeatedly. Amanda was more attentive, listening to the doctor's explanations and asking questions, but I could sense her impatience the way her eyes kept darting to the clock. Before they left, Harold asked to speak privately with Amanda in his study. They were in there for nearly an hour. When they emerged, Amanda looked somber, and Harold seemed exhausted, but relieved. "What did you talk about?" I asked Harold later that night as we were getting ready for bed. He sighed, settling against the pillows. "I updated my will. I wanted to explain to Amanda why I made the decisions I did." My stomach tightened. "What decisions?" "I'm leaving the house and the majority of my assets to you, Jane," he said, reaching for my hand. "You're my wife, my partner in everything. Amanda will receive a generous sum, but the bulk of the estate will be yours to manage." "Are you sure that's what you want?" I asked. "I don't need much, Harold. I have my own savings, my pension from the library." He squeezed my hand. "I'm absolutely sure. You deserve security, and I trust you to do right by everyone. Amanda has her career, her marriage. She'll be fine financially, but I want to know you're taken care of." I nodded, touched by his concern, but worried about how Amanda would truly feel about this arrangement, despite whatever she might have said to her father. The following months were a blur of doctor appointments, medication adjustments, and increasingly frequent hospital stays. I called Amanda weekly with updates, but she rarely answered, often texting back hours later with brief responses. Patrick, however, became surprisingly more present, especially when Harold was discussing financial matters or meeting with his lawyer. One evening, I came home from picking up prescriptions to find Patrick in Harold's home office, looking through papers on the desk. He jumped when I entered, quickly putting down what appeared to be financial statements. "Oh, Jane," he said with a tight smile. "I was just looking for some documents Harold mentioned about the business valuation. He asked me to review some numbers for him." It was a lie. Harold had explicitly told me he didn't want Patrick involved in his business affairs, but I was too exhausted from the day's hospital visit to confront him. "I'll ask Harold about it when he feels better." Patrick nodded, slipping past me out of the office. "No need to bother him with small details. I'm just trying to help." Harold's condition deteriorated rapidly over the next month. The doctors recommended hospice care, but I insisted on keeping him home as long as possible, hiring nurses to help with his medical needs. I converted our downstairs guest room into a bedroom for him, making it easier to move him in and out for appointments. Amanda visited twice during this period, each time staying only a few hours, clearly uncomfortable with her father's declining state. Patrick came more often, usually alone, always finding reasons to discuss finances or business matters, exhausting Harold with questions he was too weak to deflect. After a particularly bad episode where Harold struggled to breathe, the doctors insisted on hospitalization. I stayed by his side day and night, sleeping in a chair beside his bed, leaving only to shower and change clothes when the nurses insisted. Amanda and Patrick came to visit once during the 3 weeks Harold was in the hospital. They stayed for 45 minutes. Amanda kissed her father's forehead before leaving tears in her eyes. Patrick checked his watch repeatedly during the visit. Harold passed away peacefully in his sleep on a quiet Sunday morning with me holding his hand. I had stepped out briefly to use the restroom, and when I returned, he was gone. The nurses told me this happens often, as if patients wait for a moment of privacy for their final departure. I called Amanda immediately. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice groggy with sleep. "Mom, it's really early. Your father passed away about an hour ago," I said, my voice hollow with grief and exhaustion. There was silence on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. "Oh my God. Oh no. I should have been there. I'm so sorry." It was peaceful, I assured her, though my heart was breaking that she hadn't been there in his final days. He wasn't in pain. "We'll come right away," she said. "Patrick and I will book flights today." They arrived that evening, and for the first time in months, I saw genuine emotion from Amanda. She cried in my arms when she saw me apologizing for not being there more during her father's illness. Patrick stood awkwardly to the side, offering stilted condolences. The next few days were consumed with funeral arrangements, notifying friends and family, and receiving visitors bringing food and condolences. I moved through it all in a fog of grief, functioning on autopilot. Amanda helped with the practical details, while Patrick spent much of his time on the phone, stepping out for calls that seemed to last longer than necessary. The funeral was beautiful, a testament to how many lives Harold had touched. Colleagues, friends, neighbors, and even former clients came to pay their respects. Amanda gave a moving eulogy, sharing childhood memories and expressing gratitude for her father's love and guidance. I couldn't bring myself to speak, afraid I would break down completely. But I had written a letter that the minister read on my behalf, describing my 30 years with the most generous, kind man I had ever known. After the service at the reception in our home, I noticed Patrick speaking intently with Harold's lawyer, Walter, in a corner of the living room. Their conversation seemed heated, with Patrick gesturing emphatically and Walter maintaining a professional detachment. I made my way toward them, but before I could get there, they separated, Patrick walking away with a tight expression. Later that evening, after all the guests had left, Amanda and Patrick approached me as I was tidying the kitchen. "Mom," Amanda began, her voice gentler than it had been in months. "Patrick and I have been talking, and we think you should consider selling the house. It's so big for just one person, and the maintenance will be a lot for you to handle alone." I placed the dish I was washing carefully in the drying rack. "This is my home, Amanda. Our home. Your father and I built a life here." "We know," she said, exchanging a look with Patrick. "But we thought maybe you could move in with us. We have that guest suite in the basement that could be converted into an apartment for you. It would give you company, and we could help take care of you." The suggestion felt like a slap. Take care of me? I was 67, grieving but perfectly capable of caring for myself. And the idea of living in their basement, seeing Patrick daily, depending on them for social interaction, was unthinkable. "That's very thoughtful," I said carefully. "But I'm not ready to make any decisions right now. I need time to grieve and adjust." Patrick stepped forward. "We understand that, Jane. But there are practical considerations. The property taxes on this house alone must be significant, and there's Harold's business to think about, assets to liquidate, investments to manage." His transparent interest in the finances, rather than my well-being, confirmed every suspicion I'd ever had about him. "Harold's lawyer will help me with all those details. There's no rush to make these decisions." Amanda frowned. "Mum, we're just trying to help. Dad would want us to take care of you." "Your father trusted me to make my own decisions," I replied more firmly this time. "And right now, I've decided to stay in my home." The conversation ended there, but I could tell it wasn't over, just postponed. And I was right. Over the next few weeks, as I tried to adjust to life without Harold, Amanda and Patrick increased their pressure about the house and Harold's assets. They would drop by unannounced often when I was out claiming they needed to pick up some of Amanda's childhood mementos. One day I returned from grocery shopping to find them in Harold's office drawers, open papers spread across the desk. They jumped guiltily when I entered. "What are you doing?" I asked, setting down my shopping bags. "Just looking for some of Dad's old photos," Amanda said quickly, "for a memorial project I'm working on." But the papers on the desk were financial statements and property deeds, not photographs. I felt a cold anger rising within me. "I'd appreciate if you would ask me before going through Harold's personal papers." Patrick's expression hardened. Amanda has every right to know about her father's estate. She is his daughter, after all. The emphasis on daughter wasn't subtle. The implication was clear that I was somehow less entitled to Harold's possessions because I wasn't blood-related. It hurt more coming from Patrick than it would have from a stranger. "Yes, she is his daughter," I agreed calmly. "And I am his wife of 30 years. Harold made his wishes clear in his will, which will be read formally next week. Now I would like you both to leave, please." Amanda looked shocked at my directness. "Mum, you can't be serious." "I am completely serious. I've just lost my husband and I need space to grieve. I'll see you at the lawyer's office next week." They left reluctantly, Patrick shooting me a look of barely concealed hostility. As soon as their car pulled away, I called Walter Harold's lawyer and explained what had happened. "I'm not surprised," Walter said with a sigh. "Patrick has been calling my office daily, asking about the will and the estate valuation. I've told him repeatedly that all will be disclosed at the formal reading." "Should I be worried?" I asked, suddenly feeling vulnerable. "Harold's will is rock solid," Walter assured me. "He knew exactly what he wanted and made sure it was legally binding. Just be prepared for some potential unpleasantness at the reading." I spent the next few days securing the house, changing the locks, and gathering all important documents into a safe that only I knew the combination to. It broke my heart to have to protect myself from my own daughter, but I knew in my gut that Patrick was driving this, manipulating Amanda's grief and perhaps her latent insecurities about my place in the family. The night before the will reading, I sat alone in Harold's study, surrounded by the books he loved, the pictures of our life together on the walls. I picked up a framed photo from our 20th anniversary trip to Italy, Harold's arm around me as we stood before the Trevi fountain. His smile was so genuine, his eyes crinkled with happiness. "I miss you so much," I whispered to his image. "I don't know how to handle this situation with Amanda. I feel like I'm losing her too." I could almost hear his voice in my head, calm and reasonable as always. "You're stronger than you think, Jane. Do what's right, but also what's kind. There's always a way back to love if the foundation was built on truth." With those thoughts comforting me, I went to bed preparing myself for whatever tomorrow would bring. The morning of the will reading dawned bright and clear, a beautiful spring day that felt at odds with the heaviness in my heart. I dressed carefully in a navy blue dress Harold had always liked, wanting to feel his approval surrounding me. Walter's law office was in a historic building downtown, all polished wood and leather chairs. His assistant led me to a conference room where Amanda and Patrick were already waiting. Amanda looked pale and nervous, fidgeting with her wedding ring. Patrick sat beside her, perfectly groomed in an expensive suit, his posture radiating confidence. "Good morning," I said, taking a seat across from them. Amanda gave me a tight smile. "Morning, Mum." Patrick merely nodded, checking his watch, as if he had more important places to be. Walter entered a few minutes later, carrying a leather portfolio. He greeted each of us professionally, then took his seat at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming today," he began. "We're here to discuss the last will and testament of Harold James Stevens. Before I proceed, I want to express my personal condolences. Harold was not just a client, but a friend for over 25 years. I nodded my appreciation, noticing Patrick's impatient shifting. "I'll summarize the key provisions," Walter continued, opening the portfolio. Harold was quite specific about his wishes. First, to his wife Jane Ellen Stevens, He leaves the family home and its contents, his investment portfolio valued at approximately $2.5 million, and ownership of Stevens Engineering Consultants. I saw Patrick's eyes widen at the mention of the company. He clearly hadn't expected that. To his daughter, Amanda Marie Stevens Wilson, he leaves the sum of $500,000, the vacation property at Lake Chelan, and his collection of rare books. Amanda's face fell slightly. Though the inheritance was generous by any standard, it was clearly less than she and Patrick had anticipated. Additionally, Walter went on, Harold established a trust for any future grandchildren, with Jane serving as trustee until the beneficiaries reached the age of 25. Patrick leaned forward. Is that everything? What about the business assets, the office building, the contracts in progress? Those all fall under the ownership of Stevens Engineering Consultants, Walter explained patiently, which, as I stated, has been left to Mrs. Stevens. Patrick's face flushed with anger. That's ridiculous. Amanda is Harold's daughter, his actual family. She should inherit the business he built. Walter remained impassive. Mr. Stevens was very clear about his wishes. He discussed them at length with me on multiple occasions. The will is legally sound. Amanda had been silent, but now she turned to me, her eyes flashing. Did you pressure him into this when he was sick and vulnerable? The accusation stung like a physical blow. Of course not. Your father made these decisions himself. He wanted to make sure I was taken care of in my later years. Patrick scoffed. Taken care of? You're getting nearly everything. The house, the business, the investments. What about Amanda? What about his flesh and blood? Amanda is receiving a substantial inheritance, Walter interjected calmly. Mr. Stevens felt that given her successful career and financial stability, this division was fair. Fair. Amanda's voice rose. How is it fair that she gets everything when she isn't even real family? I felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. Amanda, how can you say that I've been your mother for 30 years? She stood up, trembling with emotion. You're not family. You only stayed because it was convenient, because Dad had a nice house and a successful business. You saw a comfortable life and you took it. Each word was like a knife to my heart. I looked at my daughter, this person I had raised and loved, tucked into bed, nursed through illnesses, cheered at graduations, and saw a stranger looking back at me. Or worse, I saw Patrick's influence, his suspicions and greed reflected in her eyes. Patrick placed a hand on Amanda's arm, but his expression wasn't comforting. It was calculating. We'll contest this, he announced. Harold was clearly not in his right mind when he made these arrangements. Walter shook his head. The will was updated and signed 18 months ago, well before Mr. Stevens became ill. He was of completely sound mind, with 2 independent witnesses present. Contesting would be both expensive and, in my professional opinion, futile. While they argued, I felt a strange calm descend over me. In that moment of clarity, I knew what I needed to do. Walter had discussed options with me privately after Harold's death, contingencies my husband had put in place for exactly this scenario. Walter, I said quietly, do you have the other document we discussed? He nodded, pulling another paper from his portfolio and sliding it across the table to me. Patrick and Amanda watched suspiciously as I read it over one last time. It was a transfer of ownership, allowing me to immediately donate a significant portion of Harold's assets to a charitable foundation we had discussed establishing in his name. Harold had set everything up, leaving only my signature needed to activate it. He had known somehow that this moment might come, that our daughter might reveal a side of herself we had never wanted to see. I signed the document without hesitation, dated it, and slid it back to Walter. What was that? Patrick demanded. What did you just sign? Just some administrative details, I said, rising from my chair. Walter, thank you for everything. I'll be in touch about the next steps. Of course, Mrs. Stevens. My office will handle all the necessary filings. I gathered my purse and walked to the door, pausing to look back at Amanda. She was watching me with a mixture of anger and confusion. I wanted to say something to remind her of the love we had shared, the family we had been, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I simply walked out, closing the door silently behind me. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall for a moment, letting the full weight of what had just happened settle on me. My daughter thought I had only been with Harold, only loved him and her because it was convenient. That 30 years of devotion, of birthday cakes and bandaged knees and midnight comforting, had all been a calculated move for financial security. I walked out of the building into the bright spring sunshine, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. The pain was almost physical, a tearing sensation in my chest, as if something vital had been ripped away. But beneath the pain was something else, a quiet resolve. Harold had prepared for this possibility, had given me the tools to protect myself and honor his legacy properly, and I would not let him down. As I drove home alone, I thought about what would happen next. Amanda and Patrick would be furious when they discovered what I had done. The confrontation was inevitable. But for the first time since Harold's death, I felt certain of my path forward. Not happy, not at peace, but purposeful. And for now, that would have to be enough. The days after the will reading passed in a strange, suspended state. I expected immediate backlash from Amanda and Patrick, angry phone calls, perhaps even legal threats. But instead, there was silence. No calls, no texts, not even an email. The quiet was almost more unsettling than an outright confrontation would have been. I used the time to begin implementing the plans Harold and I had discussed during his illness. I contacted the managers at Stevens Engineering Consultants, arranging meetings to discuss the transition of leadership. Harold had already promoted his longtime associate David Miller to Chief Operations Officer months ago, anticipating that I would need experienced help running the company. "Harold spoke very highly of you, Mrs. Stevens," David said during our first meeting at the company headquarters. "He was confident you would maintain the values and standards he established." "Please call me Jane," I said with a small smile. "And I'll need your guidance. My background is in library science, not engineering." David nodded. Harold was clear about that. "He suggested you serve as chairperson of the board, making high-level decisions about company direction, while the day-to-day operations remain with the existing management team." It was a sensible plan, typical of Harold's thoughtful foresight. I spent the next week learning about the company's projects, clients, and employees. It was both overwhelming and therapeutic, giving me purpose during a time when grief might otherwise have consumed me. In the evenings, I worked with Walter on establishing the Harold Stevens Foundation, the charitable organization that would now receive a significant portion of Harold's estate. We focused on causes he had cared deeply about: education for disadvantaged youth and heart disease research chief among them. "The foundation will be funded with approximately 60% of the investment portfolio," Walter explained as we finalized the paperwork. "That leaves you with the house, the business, and enough investments to ensure your financial security for life." "And Amanda still gets everything Harold specified for her in the will," I confirmed. Walter nodded. "Absolutely. The $500,000, the lake house, the book collection, those remain untouched. The foundation is being funded from what would have been your portion of the estate." I sighed, feeling both sadness and certainty. Harold and I discussed this possibility. He didn't want to believe Amanda might react badly, but he wanted me to have options. "He was a good man," Walter said quietly, "and he knew his daughter for better or worse." 3 weeks after the will reading, as I was reviewing applicants for the Foundation's board of directors, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors, and a momentary hope flashed through me that it might be Amanda finally ready to talk. But when I opened the door, I found both Amanda and Patrick standing there, their expressions grim. "May we come in?" Amanda asked stiffly. I stepped aside. "Of course." They followed me to the living room, declining my offer of tea or coffee. Patrick remained standing while Amanda perched on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid. "We've been trying to understand what happened at the lawyer's office," she began without preamble. "Patrick's friend at the county records office mentioned a new charitable foundation being established in Dad's name." Of course. That explained the delay in their response. They had been investigating rather than confronting me directly. Yes, I acknowledged. Your father and I had discussed creating a foundation to continue his philanthropic work. Patrick's eyes narrowed. A foundation that mysteriously receives most of the assets that were supposed to go to you. Assets that should have rightfully gone to Amanda in the first place. I maintained my composure, reminding myself that anger would only escalate the situation. These were your father's wishes, Amanda. He wanted to leave a lasting legacy beyond just providing for his family. When was this decided? Amanda demanded. Because it wasn't mentioned in the will reading. The foundation was your father's idea, something we discussed during his illness. He set up the framework, leaving me the option to activate it after his passing if I chose to. I looked directly at Amanda. He hoped it wouldn't be necessary, that we would remain a family supporting each other through our grief. Patrick scoffed. Convenient timing, isn't it? Right after Amanda rightfully questioned your claim to Harold's estate. I felt a flash of anger but suppressed it. Nothing about losing my husband has been convenient, Patrick. Nothing about having my daughter tell me I'm not family after 30 years has been convenient. Amanda flinched slightly, but her expression remained hard. You're trying to punish me for what I said by giving away what should stay in the family. I'm not punishing anyone, I replied calmly. I'm honoring your father's wishes. The foundation will help countless people funding scholarships and heart disease research. Isn't that a beautiful way to remember him? What about remembering him through his own grandchildren? Amanda countered. Patrick and I were planning to start a family soon. That money could have secured their future. I had to work hard to keep my expression neutral. So that was the plan, to have children, and then press for more of Harold's estate in their name. Your father established a trust for any grandchildren. They'll be well provided for when they come along. Patrick stepped forward, his patience clearly exhausted. Let's stop pretending. You're diverting assets to prevent Amanda from contesting the will. It's a transparent maneuver. I looked at him steadily. The foundation is irrevocable, Patrick. The transfers have already been processed. Even if that had been my motivation, which it wasn't, there's nothing to contest now. The colour drained from his face. You had no right. I had every legal right, I corrected him gently, as Harold's widow and the primary beneficiary of his estate. Amanda stood up abruptly. So that's it. You get the house, the business, and we're supposed to be grateful for what little Dad left us. The unfairness of her characterization stung. $500,000 and a lakefront property is hardly little, Amanda. Your father wanted you to have meaningful inheritance while ensuring I was secure in my later years. He also wanted to give back to causes he believed in. Why is that so difficult to accept? Because it's not fair. Amanda's composure finally broke. I was his daughter for 38 years. You were only his wife for 30. The irony of her statement seemed lost on her. Only 30 years. As if 3 decades of marriage, of building a life together, of raising her together, meant less than the biological connection. Amanda, I said softly, your father loved you more than anything. He was so proud of the woman you've become, your success, your independence. He didn't think you needed his money to thrive. He believed in your ability to create your own prosperity. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of the Amanda I knew, a brief softening around her eyes. But then she looked at Patrick and her expression hardened again. We should go, she said to him. There's nothing more to discuss. Patrick nodded, placing a possessive hand on her lower back. We'll be in touch about collecting the items specified in the will. They moved toward the door, and I followed, a hollow feeling expanding in my chest. As they stepped outside, I made one last attempt. Amanda, I called, whatever you think of me or my motives, I have always loved you as my own daughter. That hasn't changed. She paused on the porch, her back to me. For a breathless moment, I thought she might turn around, might show some sign that the connection we had built over 30 years wasn't completely severed. But then Patrick urged her forward, and they walked to their car without looking back. I closed the door, slowly leaning against it, as tears slid silently down my cheeks. The house felt emptier than ever, the silence oppressive. I wandered into the kitchen, automatically putting on the kettle for tea, a habit formed over decades of domestic life with Harold. As the water heated, I noticed a small magnetic whiteboard on the refrigerator where Harold and I used to leave notes for each other. His last message to me was still there, written the day before his final hospital admission. Pick up dry cleaning. Love you more than yesterday, less than tomorrow. H. I traced his handwriting with my fingertip, feeling simultaneously close to him and achingly aware of his absence. I did the right thing, didn't I? I whispered to the empty kitchen. The foundation is what you would have wanted. There was no answer, of course, but in my heart I felt his approval. Harold had always believed in giving back, in using privilege to create opportunity for others. The foundation would be his legacy, a way for his generosity to continue impacting lives long after his own had ended. The kettle whistled, calling me back to the present moment. As I prepared my tea, I made a decision. I wouldn't let this conflict with Amanda define my future or dishonor Harold's memory. I would pour my energy into making the foundation successful, into preserving the ethical standards of his company, and into building a new life for myself that would make him proud. And I would leave the door open for Amanda, hoping that someday she might walk through it again. The Harold Stevens Foundation officially launched 2 months after our confrontation. I had invited Amanda to the ceremony, sending a formal invitation to her home and following up with an email explaining how meaningful her presence would be. The invitation was met with silence, which hurt but didn't surprise me. The launch event was held at the city's botanical gardens, a place Harold and I had often visited on Sunday afternoons. Nearly 200 people attended, including business associates, friends, former clients, and representatives from the organizations that would receive our initial grants. Standing at the podium to deliver my opening remarks, I felt a strange mixture of pride and sorrow. Harold should have been here, should have seen his vision come to life. But looking out at the assembled crowd, I could feel his influence in the room, could almost hear his voice coaching me through my nervousness about public speaking. Harold believed that success carried responsibility, I told the audience. He built his business from nothing, but he never forgot the teachers who encouraged him, the mentors who guided him, the community that supported him. This foundation is his way of completing that circle, of ensuring that future generations have the same opportunities to learn, to grow, and to thrive. After the ceremony, as guests mingled over refreshments, Walter approached me with a warm smile. "Jane, this is magnificent. Harold would be so proud of what you've accomplished in such a short time." "Thank you," I said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. "It's been therapeutic having a project to focus on." Walter nodded understandingly. "Have you heard from Amanda recently?" I shook my head. "Not a word. I keep hoping, but—" "Give it time," he advised gently. "Grief affects people differently, and Patrick's influence isn't helping matters. But the foundation might actually be the bridge eventually. It represents the best of Harold after all." I was about to respond when I noticed a familiar figure at the entrance to the garden. Amanda, standing alone, scanning the crowd nervously. My heart leapt, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Excuse me, Walter," I murmured. "I need to speak with someone." I made my way through the crowd slowly, not wanting to appear too eager or desperate. When Amanda finally spotted me approaching, her expression was unreadable, a careful neutrality that reminded me painfully of her father. "Amanda," I said simply when I reached her. "I'm so glad you came." She nodded stiffly. "I saw the announcement in the business section of the paper. The foundation. It's impressive." "Thank you. Your father would be pleased to know you're here." I gestured to the gathering. "Would you like to meet some of the board members? Or perhaps get a drink first?" "Actually," she said, shifting uncomfortably, "I was hoping we could talk privately." Relief and apprehension flooded through me simultaneously. "Of course. There's a quiet spot near the Japanese garden. We can talk there." We walked in silence through the winding paths past flowering shrubs and carefully tended perennials. The Japanese garden was peaceful with a small stone bench overlooking a koi pond. We sat side by side watching the orange and white fish glide through the clear water. Patrick and I separated 3 weeks ago, Amanda said abruptly, still staring at the pond. I tried to hide my surprise, but my sharp intake of breath gave me away. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you all right? She gave a short, humorless laugh. Am I all right? I don't know. I discovered he was having an affair with a colleague. Apparently it had been going on for months, even during Dad's illness. Oh, Amanda, I murmured. I'm so sorry. She shook her head. Don't be. It was enlightening, actually. When I confronted him, do you know what he said? He said he'd been planning to leave anyway now that it was clear there wasn't going to be a big inheritance coming my way. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. That's terrible. It gets better, she continued, a bitter edge to her voice. He actually told me that he'd only proposed because he thought Dad's company would eventually be mine. Said he'd put up with what he called my daddy issues because the payoff would be worth it. I reached for her hand instinctively. To my surprise, she didn't pull away. You deserved so much better than that. Did I? She asked, finally turning to look at me. After how I've behaved, the things I said to you. Her eyes filled with tears. I've been awful. You were grieving, I said gently. We all were. Grief can make us say and do things we don't mean. She shook her head firmly. No, I can't blame this all on grief. Patrick influenced me, yes, but I chose to listen to him. I chose to believe the worst about you, about your relationship with Dad, even though I had 30 years of evidence to the contrary. She wiped at her eyes. The truth is, I was jealous. Jealous, I repeated, confused. Of what? Of how much Dad loved you. Of the partnership you had. As I got older, I realized that what you two had was special, rare. Patrick and I never had that kind of connection, that deep respect and affection. I think part of me wanted to believe your relationship couldn't be as genuine as it seemed, because that would mean I'd settled for something less in my own marriage. Her honesty stunned me. Amanda, your father loved you immeasurably. There was never any competition. I know that now, she said quietly. After Patrick left, I started going through some of Dad's things that I'd taken from the house. His journals, letters he'd written to me when I was in college. Her voice broke slightly. He wrote about you so beautifully, Mum. About how you changed his life. How watching you love me as your own taught him what real generosity looks like. Mum. She had called me Mum. The familiar term of endearment I hadn't heard in months brought fresh tears to my eyes. I was so wrong, Amanda continued. About everything. About you only staying because it was convenient. Dad's journals made it clear how much you sacrificed for our family, how many opportunities you passed up to keep us together. And then there's this foundation. She gestured toward the party in the distance. You gave away millions that could have been yours to honor his memory. I squeezed her hand. The money was never what mattered to me, Amanda. It was always the family we built, the love we shared. That's what I've missed most these past months. Not Harold's assets, but our connection, yours and mine. She broke down, then sobbing quietly as I put my arm around her shoulders. We sat like that for several minutes, the weight of months of misunderstanding and hurt gradually lifting with each tear. Finally, she straightened up, wiping her face with a tissue from her purse. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. What I said was unforgivable. But I'm hoping with time maybe we can rebuild something. There's nothing to rebuild, I said firmly. The foundation is already there, 30 years strong. We just need to remember it, not reconstruct it. She smiled tentatively. You sound like Dad. The highest compliment you could give me, I replied, returning her smile. We sat in comfortable silence for a few moments before Amanda spoke again. I saw the educational programs the foundation is launching, the scholarships for engineering students from low-income backgrounds, the mentoring initiative. I nodded. Your father always said his success came from the teachers who believed in him when he was young. He wanted to pay that forward. I'd like to help, she said, her voice stronger now. I have experience in finance that could be useful for the foundation, if you'd be open to it, that is. The offer caught me by surprise, but the rightness of it settled immediately in my heart. I think that would be perfect. We're just getting started and there's so much to do. Amanda stood up, extending her hand to help me to my feet. Then let's get back to the party. I should meet these board members, get a sense of the projects underway. As we walked back toward the reception, she added hesitantly, I've been thinking of moving out of the city. Patrick is keeping the condo in the divorce settlement, and I need a fresh start. You know, I said carefully, the guest house on the property has been sitting empty. Your father renovated it right before he got sick, thinking it might be good for visitors, or eventually as a place for us to downsize to while keeping the main house for family gatherings. She glanced at me, hope flickering in her eyes. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? The commute to the city wouldn't be too bad, I continued, and it would give us time to reacquaint ourselves. No pressure, just proximity. I'd like that, she said softly. Very much. We rejoined the reception, and I watched with growing contentment as Amanda introduced herself to the foundation board members, asking thoughtful questions and offering insightful comments. She had her father's intelligence and charisma qualities that had been overshadowed during her time with Patrick, but were now shining through again. Later that evening, after all the guests had departed, and Amanda had gone home with plans to visit again the next day, I walked through the quiet house feeling Harold's presence more strongly than I had since his death. In our bedroom, I opened the small journal I kept on my nightstand and wrote a few lines. Today, our daughter came back to us. The foundation has launched successfully. Your legacy continues in ways both expected and surprising. I miss you every day, but I'm finding my way forward. We both are. Setting down my pen, I gazed at the framed photo of the three of us on my bedside table, taken at Amanda's college graduation. We were all smiling, arms linked, facing a future we believed would unfold together. In a way, despite everything, despite Harold's absence, that future was still unfolding as it should. Family isn't defined by blood or DNA, but by who stays when the world falls apart. For 30 years, I thought I understood that principle completely, living it daily as a stepmother who became simply a mother. But it took losing everything I thought mattered to truly comprehend the depth of that truth. The year following Harold's death and the painful rift with Amanda taught me that family is rebuilt daily through choices, through forgiveness, through showing up even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Amanda moved into the guest house 2 weeks after the foundation launch event. The first few days were awkward, both of us overly polite, carefully avoiding topics that might reopen wounds. But gradually, the natural rhythm of shared meals and casual conversations began to heal what had been broken between us. I found these while unpacking, Amanda said one evening, bringing a box of old photographs to the main house where we were having dinner. Look at this one of you helping me get ready for prom. The photo showed a 17-year-old Amanda in a midnight blue dress, me standing behind her adjusting her corsage, both of us laughing at something outside the frame. I remembered Harold taking the picture, making some corny joke to capture natural smiles. You were so beautiful, I said, touching the image gently. Your father couldn't stop crying after you left with your date. Said he wasn't ready for you to be grown up. Amanda smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. I wish I had appreciated those moments more when they were happening. I took so much for granted. We all do, I assured her. It's part of being human. Our reconciliation wasn't always smooth. There were difficult conversations, moments when old hurts resurfaced unexpectedly. One Sunday morning, as we were working together in the garden, Amanda suddenly put down her trowel and looked at me intently. Do you ever think about what you gave up to be with us? She asked. Your own children may be a different career path. The question caught me off guard, but I answered honestly. Sometimes briefly. But it never felt like a sacrifice, Amanda. It felt like a choice, the best choice I ever made. Being your mother, being Harold's wife, that was the life I wanted. She nodded slowly. I believed Patrick when he said you must have had ulterior motives for marrying Dad, that no one would willingly take on someone else's child without some personal gain in mind. But that was really just my insecurity talking, wasn't it? And maybe his projection. Some people can't understand love that doesn't come with conditions, I said, returning to my gardening. That's their limitation, not ours. As weeks turned into months, Amanda became increasingly involved with the Harold Stevens Foundation. Her financial expertise proved invaluable as we expanded our programming, and working together gave us a shared purpose that strengthened our healing relationship. The Foundation's first major initiative was a scholarship program for engineering students from underserved communities, something Harold had always wanted to establish. At the ceremony awarding the inaugural scholarships, Amanda gave a speech that left me fighting back tears. My father believed that talent is distributed equally throughout society, but opportunity is not, she told the audience of students, educators, and donors. He built his success on the kindness and mentorship of others who saw his potential. Through this foundation, established by my mother, Jane Stevens, we hope to continue that legacy, to recognize potential where others might miss it. My mother. The simple acknowledgement meant everything. After the ceremony, one of the scholarship recipients, a young woman from a struggling neighborhood across town, approached us. "Mrs. Stevens," she said shyly, "I just wanted to thank you personally. This scholarship means I can focus on my studies instead of working 2 jobs. It's changing my life." Amanda put her arm around my shoulders as I spoke with the student. Later, she confessed, "Watching you today, seeing the impact the foundation is already having, I feel ashamed that I ever questioned your motives. You've created something beautiful from our loss." "We've created it together," I corrected her. "Your father would be so proud of how you've stepped up to help lead this effort." The foundation wasn't our only joint project. 6 months after moving into the guest house, Amanda approached me with an unexpected proposal. "I've been thinking about Dad's business," she said one evening, as we sat on the patio watching the sunset. "Stevens Engineering has always been family-owned, and while David is doing an excellent job as COO, I wonder if there's a place for me there as well." I set down my glass of wine, surprised but intrigued. "You want to work for the company, but your career in financial consulting has never been as fulfilling as I pretended," she admitted. "I went into finance because it seemed impressive, lucrative. But I've always been fascinated by Dad's work, the problem-solving, the creativity of engineering solutions. I have the business background to complement the technical expertise already in the company." The idea had merit. Harold had always hoped Amanda might take an interest in the family business, though he'd never pressured her. "What role are you thinking of?" "Maybe Director of Strategic Development. I could work on expanding into new markets, forming partnerships with the educational institutions we support through the foundation, create a pipeline from our scholarship programs to employment opportunities." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and the synergy between the foundation and the company made perfect sense. "I think it's a wonderful idea. We should meet with David next week to discuss it." The transition wasn't immediate, but over the next few months, Amanda gradually shifted from her consulting job to a leadership role at Stevens Engineering. The company flourished under the combined guidance of David's technical expertise and Amanda's business acumen, expanding into sustainable engineering projects that aligned perfectly with the Foundation's environmental initiatives. As we approached the 1-year anniversary of Harold's death, I found myself reflecting on the tremendous changes we had experienced. The pain of loss remained a quiet ache that flared on birthdays and holidays, but alongside it had grown a new appreciation for the resilience of love, the power of forgiveness, and the unexpected ways healing can manifest. Amanda suggested we mark the anniversary with a private remembrance at home rather than a formal memorial. The evening was cool but clear, perfect for gathering around the fire pit Harold had built in the backyard. We invited only David and Walter, the 2 people who had been most supportive during our difficult year. As we shared stories about Harold, laughing at memories of his terrible dad jokes and tearing up at recollections of his quiet generosity, I realized that something fundamental had shifted within me. The raw grief had transformed into a gentler, more sustainable form of remembrance. Harold was gone, but the love he had cultivated remained flourishing in new and unexpected ways. Later, after our guests had departed, and Amanda had returned to the guest house, I sat alone by the dying embers of the fire. The night was peaceful stars glittering overhead in the vast darkness. I thought about the words Amanda had hurled at me a year ago in that sterile lawyer's office. "You're not family. You only stayed because it was convenient." How wrong she had been, and how completely she now understood that. Family isn't about convenience. It's about commitment. It's about showing up day after day through joy and heartbreak, through misunderstandings and reconciliations. It's about choosing each other repeatedly, intentionally, even when it would be easier to walk away. Harold and I had built our family on that foundation of choice and commitment. And though his absence left a void that would never completely fill the structure we had created together, remained sound. Amanda and I had found our way back to each other stronger in the broken places, wiser for having navigated the storm of grief and misunderstanding. Sometimes losing everything you thought mattered reveals what truly does. And in that space of loss, we can find the courage to rebuild what no inheritance could ever buy: genuine love and connection. As I watched the last ember fade to darkness, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. We would be all right, Amanda and I. Different than before, changed by our experiences, but whole in a new way. And somewhere I believed Harold was watching, satisfied, that the family he loved had found its way back to love. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship after a painful misunderstanding? What helped you find forgiveness and healing? I would be so grateful if you would share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing with someone who might need to hear that broken relationships can heal with time and effort. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that true family is built on love, not convenience or blood. Until next time, take care of each other.